If you could see what I see, you'd see the kindness in your eyes that's born from deep within, from your soul that's good and wise. You'd see a loving look from eyes of blue that talk, a love that lights my way and leads me where I walk. You are so beautiful to me, so very beautiful to me. Those kind eyes that I see, so very beautiful to me. Did you know you are my hero? You're always there for me. I see the world you see, and it's so beautiful to me.
Hi, everybody. This is Richard Sachs. I'm your host on Lost Arts Radio, and this is a great show that we've got with Kathleen Marquardt, who hasn't been around for Lost Arts Radio for a while. And she's been on before. I recommend the archives in Lost Arts Radio with Kathleen on them to kind of catch up a little bit on her background. But she's been the vice president of American Policy Center since 2000. And we've talked a lot about them. Had Tom DeWeese on the show quite a few times. He'll be back soon also. And that's centered about property rights and Agenda 21 and everything connected with that. And there is a lot connected with Agenda 21 because it's as Rosa Coria and others have explained, it's a system for total inventory and control of every item living and otherwise on the planet. Pretty big project, and gets into all kinds of changing of the mentality of the population and brainwashing and programming and issues about education, what's being done to the kids now to set them up to support all that, because in general the global rulers' plan is to have us carry out our own gradual suicide rather than them having to do anything. So far it's working pretty well, apparently. And so there's a lot to talk about, way more than we'll have time for in this show, but it should be interesting. Also, I want to mention that Kathleen is the author of a book called Animal Scam that I read and thought it was excellent. And you know, I don't have any labels, as you may have noticed if you've been on the show for a while, listening to it. I don't eat animals because of my research into health and reversing aging and stuff like that, and also consciousness, and led me into realizing why that's not ideal for humans. But I'm not out here as an evangelist or trying to tell anybody what to do, and I recognize that things that are true are also scams. And what's being done in the name of animal rights is part of what's pushing people into these little human settlements that Agenda 21 prescribes for us to live in, and being done to give up rights, just like global warming and climate change. Even though climate disruption is very real, the major cause of it right now is almost never discussed, which is geoengineering. And I've been a vehement defender of the environment and environmentalist since the mid-'60s, and I still am. But even though taking care of your life support system, which is called the environment, should not be a partisan issue. It's really obvious if you want to keep living in physical bodies, you have to do that kind of thing. But it's also, because it's true, it's being used as a scam to fool everybody into giving up all of their God-given liberties and property rights and everything else for global tyranny, which I don't think is a very good plan. So that's part of the context of what we'll talk about with Kathleen, and I'm just really glad that she's willing to give us some of her time. So thanks for being here, Kathleen. We're really glad to be with you. Sorry your camera's not working, but it's going to be a great discussion, I think.
Thank you, Richard. I'm glad I'm here, and I wish my camera were working. It must be my computer, because this is the second time in like 3 months.
Yeah, the computers are running the world in a way now, and the humans like us are kind of subservient, but at least they're not taking away all of our abilities, and we can still talk on audio. So since we talked to you last time, which is quite a while, do you want to start by letting us know the main areas of your interest and focus now and what you're doing?
I would say, obviously the property rights issue, but that's mostly Tom. It's
Okay.
what they're doing to our kids in the schools, why, I mean, the overall thing, more than just what they're teaching them specifically, but why they're doing it, how they're doing it, and that's a big thing. And of course, the animal rights issue right now, because they're making major inroads all across the country. So, because they become part of the, they're a UN NGO, so they are sort of another tool in the whole plan.
Yeah, and I forgot to mention one little detail of what's happening in government now called the Green New Deal, and that ties into everything that you're talking about. And I think they're planning to outlaw cows and some other things as part of that, or at least keep them in little bubbles so they can't destroy the world. But
It's more than that. I mean, they are trying to outlaw cows, but the thing is, even for, if you think about it, for vegetarians, there isn't enough land mass to feed all the people in the world a vegetarian diet, because where they graze cows, the land can't support crops that feed humans. So
yeah, that's a good point. Goats are even more adaptable than cows in that way too, because their diet is a little bit less specific. But I think the main thing about the Green New Deal is to let us know that freedom is really unsustainable, basically. And everything needs to be tightly controlled by a wise, benevolent central authority. And then we have a chance to save the world.
Yes, and who's going to be that benevolent authority?
Yeah, I think they have that already worked out, so we don't even have to worry about it.
Right, exactly. We're supposed to be programmed now to say, but of course, they're going to just treat us really nicely.
Exactly, and we know they care about us, so they wouldn't have done all this work,
I know.
for the New World Order and everything. And you mentioned education. I think that's really a tremendously important issue. I've been interested in it all my life, and I think it's got to be the central core of any positive change, or actually the rulers agree, and they think it should be the central element in a negative change. And now they're recruiting children to make sure we all agree with the Green New Deal, right? I've seen them on TV.
Oh, they're recruiting children. They've been recruiting children for everything, but they learned from communism that they had to cover all the bases in order to achieve their goal. Whereas communism did, get rid of everybody's guns, make them all slaves,
right,
and put them into the communist schools, but they also got rid of all the churches. Instead of what they're doing now is making one big church that's supposed to cover everything.
Exactly. That'll end fighting over religion, which is another cause of, world conflict, right?
Right. Yeah. I don't see that happening. But the big thing is the schools, that programming our children, changing their values, attitudes, and beliefs every day in the schools, and making them into part of the common. All kids are supposed to get rid of their individuality and become part of the common, and that's going to solve everything. But what they've done incredible work in doing it. They have a program that was written, I think, in 1974 in Michigan, University of Michigan. That was the Department of Health and Human Services ordered it, determining how to dumb down all the kids except the few that they're going to keep as the elite, and the rest they're going to drug or give them pleasures to just be happy being nothings.
Yeah. Well, fortunately, medical science is going to help with that too, because they have an anti-stress vaccine that is going to, it has these little organisms that eat the parts of your brain that are connected with worry. And that means nobody's going to be stressed anymore.
Whoa, you just blew me away with that one. So this is I mean, they're doing this. I know we're going off the wall on a lot of things, but the whole vaccine issue, the whole government pushing the vaccine issue, and now they're going to have one that seems like that should be pretty much the final one, other than the one that's going to just say that you're going to rather say goodbye than be stressed.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you want to commit suicide, you have to have a license for that, but I'm sure they'll grant it to some people. But I think right now there's this tremendous press toward global censorship of any inappropriate communication, and that's going along really well too. And it's obvious that it's right in line with what they think will lead to total world peace, right? Because there won't be any more conflict if there's no individuality.
And that's the bottom line. Get rid of all the individuality except theirs.
Yeah, exactly. And, as I've talked about before, I think this is simply a step on the way to a total ceremonial sacrifice of all life on the planet. But even if it only went as far as total control, there'd be some cause for concern. So we've got enough for, probably 50 shows here or something like that. But you want to start by looking at sharing how the educational system is being used to play its part in all this?
Sure. You have to, the problem is you have to look back in history and where all this started and why we have public schools today. And it isn't because the people in communities figured that out. They already had schools. They had no thought of let's making all of our schools public and everybody talking to each other. But John Dewey, along with the Frankfurt School, learned that all they needed to do was get a hold of the kids, as the Marxists say, and brainwash them. And that's what they've been doing since the early 1900s, and people haven't realized it. It's taken this long for us to see the snowflakes and the other results of the dumbing down in the schools.
Well, so what you said about what happened before that, it sounds like what you're saying is the first kind of schools were home schools. And then when individual parents needed to cooperate to have time and enough resources and knowledge to make a good home school, they had community schools, and they would cooperate to make those work, sometimes having primary teachers and things like that, but it was all under control of the parents, I think. Is that accurate?
Yes, and actually I went to a one-room schoolhouse, the same one my mother went to, and every row was a different grade, and it worked very well because the teacher had a black rubber hose. And it's really true. I got a lot out, and I had the same teacher my mother had. So you can imagine how old this lady was.
Wow.
What happened was then the powers that be, what do you call them, the power elite, whoever, the ones that are trying to establish a one world government, decided they needed control of the schools. And that's when they instituted the public school system.
And they present that as every child having the right to a complete education, right?
Yes, exactly. And people today, one of the big, and I know I'm jumping ahead, but one of the big things that people are doing besides saying, take your kids out of school and homeschool, which I think is the greatest idea.
Right.
The other thing is that they say, take control of your school board. That's stupid. That's crazy. Your school board has nothing to do. They're just the little people up there that you think have any control. But all of this comes down from the federal government. Your state took money to institute all this stuff. The federal government is saying you're teaching this and this and this and this.
So this is a lot like how they enforce Agenda 21. It's by free money, right?
Oh, everything is money because if they give communities money for the schools, they had to tax people to get that money. So they're redistributing your wealth, and they're making strings attached to all the monies they give to all the communities to do all the Agenda 21 things.
Okay, so how does the money flow in the educational system to make that happen?
Well, have you noticed how many schools, all across the country, people are saying, we need more money, we need more money. Our teachers are having to buy their own.
Yeah, the teachers are all eating out of dumpsters, and the kids are not having any clothes, and they're crawling to school, and the teachers are just there out of, selfless service, even though they're starving to death and all that stuff. Yeah, I've heard about it.
Besides that the teachers are being paid, but there's a whole level above the teachers that have nothing to do with teaching the kids. They're just filler, one, to redistribute our wealth, and two, to make sure that the teachers are all teaching the Common Core or No Child Left Behind or whatever that is.
Right.
And about, 2013, 14, all of us, a lot of parents in Tennessee got together and went and researched all the school books that they were putting into the schools in 2017.
Wow.
And I have to say, we spent several weeks looking at all these school books, and I would say that if half the parents that are at least knowledgeable about things went and looked at these school books, they, one, would take their kids out of school and they'd start screaming. But
yeah, exactly. That's a really important subject, what's in the books. And right before that, another important thing that you brought up that is now affecting education, so-called education from preschool through PhD and medical school, and that is that because of these agencies and how the people they put in to enforce the policies and make sure the teachers do the right thing, the teachers... See, people might not remember, teachers used to actually teach things out of their own life experience and their own wisdom and what they'd learned all their life. Now, with standardized curricula, the teacher isn't that kind of teacher anymore. They're a facilitator, and they're told exactly what to teach and how, right? Just kind of like newscasters don't know anything about the news anymore. They just read off a teleprompter and have the right facial expressions and collect the money.
Do you feel like you're living in 1984?
Yeah, kind of like that.
That's exactly what's happening. And the teachers aren't teaching. And I have a granddaughter that's just started school, and she got sent home with because her father wants her to be socialized, therefore she goes to school, but grandma's going to be getting them every day after school to unsocialize them. And but she got sent home these sight words, and I had a sort of a hissy fit at my kid's house. She is not going to learn one word of the sight word. She doesn't need to. She's going to sound them out. That's what they're doing. So all these kids are dyslexic. They can't read because if they have these. That's what sight words are. They're using all these little tools.
It reminds me of Pol Pot in Cambodia, where he had to kill everybody with glasses because it was a sign they might be able to read, and that would be really irritating to the power structure. Exactly.
You've got it exactly. That's a great. I'm going to use that if you don't mind.
Sure.
No, we're in a bad situation.
So what are they teaching them in these books? Why is everybody having heart attacks when they read the school books? What's in there?
Well,
and tell us what grades you're talking about too.
Oh, all the grades. Now, all the lower, in I don't know what you're allowed to say on this show, but in kindergarten, they're supposedly teaching kids how to sexually pleasure themselves. And they're teaching them about the different sexes, not just male and female.
No, that's old-fashioned, right?
Yeah, right. And they're they're pushing the whole sexual thing, of course.
Yeah.
Because it's part of the pleasure thing. Getting kids into pleasure and drugs is going to be, they're getting them into the drugs in the school by just all the drugs. What is it? 57% of school kids are drugged?
That's about the same, just by chance, of course. That's about the same percentage that have degenerative diseases. by the time they're in second or third grade or something.
Of course. I mean, I'm not a vegetarian, but I know that what happens in my gut is happening throughout my whole body and is controlling my whole body. So I'm very picky about my food. So,
yeah, that's why we need GMOs and spray all the food sprayed with poison before you eat it, which is cutting edge science and stuff like that.
And think of all the chemicals they give to people in all the over-the-counter drugs. I take drugs, none, zero, zip, and I will live with that.
That's very unusual these days.
Yes, but people are waking up. I belong to some groups that are actually working very hard on getting people to realize that they know more about their bodies than their doctors do, and they need to take control. And I know I've gone totally off the subject we were talking about. I apologize.
That's okay. This is all one subject. I mean, people may not realize it, but everything is one subject at the deepest level.
Yes.
And it's either, it's all light or dark. And depends which direction it's going into. But since you mentioned doctors, part of the same subject, doctors used to, maybe they were, back to about 1910 or so, they were still taught to be drug dealers, but at least they were allowed to use their own insight to see what was going on with a patient and see what might work in their particular situation. Now, like teachers, they're facilitators. And they're told by insurance companies and government agencies, these are the things you can diagnose, and if you do, then this number is what goes through it about which drugs you have to prescribe.
Exactly, yeah. And they specialize. I have a number of friends here right now that are very, very sick, and they have to go to this one doctor for one part, one doctor for another, and they never put anything together, so they're never going to find out the answer, but they don't want to find out the answer. I mean,
no, because they've been programmed to be afraid. That, well, if we find out too much, it might be really terrible. So we have to stay drugged in different ways, like you were just saying, and to avoid having to look at the terrifying truth, right?
Yep. And people, I live in Tennessee, and I have to tell you, I moved here 7 or 8 years ago, and I was shocked at what people eat here and call it food.
Right.
Processed and sugar and grain. But anyway, people are destroying their bodies, and they don't want to wake up. It's some people want to wake up, others don't. It's habit, it's laziness, it's whatever.
And I think you just define drugs, because whatever helps you to stay asleep is a drug, even if it's a social habit or whatever, if it's a chemical, whatever it is. The whole point of drugs is not to be aware of what's bothering you. And anything that helps you wake up is anti-drug. So, but you were about to say what is in the textbooks, and I think I interrupted you.
No, you didn't interrupt. We just moved off and back again. But as they get older, besides dumbing them down with, you've seen Common Core math problems, I think you've seen, with circles around each number, and I tutor in algebra and geometry.
So do you know Common Core then? Do you speak Common Core?
I do not. I don't teach that, and I just tell the kids and the parents of the kids that I'm teaching you how to do it so that you're going to like it and do it and see how it affects your life. All these kids that are learning Common Core are going out and they're getting jobs that all they do is work at the cash register, and if the computer goes down, they can't give you change. Literally, they can't give you change. So
I know it.
So that's what's that's in the math. The scientists, what's going on in the sciences, because they're giving them all this garbage. The big, so when they get to college, besides they have to take remedial reading and math and everything. Then they're directed into the sustainable development degrees. Everything is about sustainable development, or what do you call it? The gender studies.
Oh yeah, right.
All these things that when they get out of college and they've paid gazillions of dollars, they have nothing. They have nothing to show that they can hold down a job. Because how many jobs are in sustainable development? Only those that of the kids that belong to the top leaders or the useful idiots of the UN. Mm-hmm. So where are the kids going to go with their jobs? And they never taught to use deductive reasoning. You cannot have moot courts there anymore because there's only one side you can take on every issue. So they're brain dead. I'm sorry.
No, you're right.
I get worked up.
Yeah, that's good. So have you seen enough Common Core to give an example that would show people the kind of math reasoning that is taught in Common Core? Or do you stay too far away from it to really know?
I've seen it, but I forgive me, there is no way in Hades that I could give a demonstration because I can't understand how you circle all the different numbers and you come up with this sort of average and then you subtract some. I'm sorry.
I think part of it that we have to not skip over is it depends how you feel about the answer too, right? Because if there are certain mathematical answers that are hurtful, you certainly don't want to give them any exposure.
Yes. And I'm laughing, but I should be crying while you say that.
Yeah, it's okay. I think the laughing helps, you not go crazy immediately.
Exactly.
And they're teaching them new, deeper understanding of history, as I understand it too, right?
You mean all rewritten history?
Yeah.
Yep. Everything, in the last year, I have been studying the history of what is going on in the world in order to, to understand Agenda 21 and the people that came up with it. And I just read, Tom and I met with some people, and one of the persons there had this book that she gave several of us, The Killing of Uncle Sam.
I was just thinking of that book.
Oh,
that's a great book, by the way. Have you read it?
It blew my mind. I'm listening to it now on CD in my car as I drive to hear it again, because it's like, you think you know history. And what scares me is when a friend got up and gave a speech about Lincoln, and I gave him pages of stuff saying everything that you said about Lincoln is a lie, And this is what scares me is, okay, what have I learned, but what haven't I learned that I still should know? I mean, that's...
Right. Well, I think it's fine to talk about what Rodney Howard Brown explains in that Killing of Uncle Sam book. It was amazing. And I think it's just part of a much bigger picture. It starts around when Cecil Rhodes was putting his group together for the Society of the Elect or something like that?
Right.
Became other groups later. And it was basically to unify the world under British control, if I understand it.
Yep. No, he came up with this when he was in college.
Yeah.
I mean, the guy was brilliant. He was twisted, but he was brilliant.
Yeah, a lot of these twisted guys are brilliant.
Yeah, that makes you wonder. I think, I could have been a lot smarter if I were a little bit more evil.
Or you could have been more evil if you were smarter or something. I'm not sure which one comes first. But they miss certain parts of it, like the fact that the way nature's put together, whatever you do to somebody else comes back to you multiplied. And none of these guys understand that and think they're above it. But other than that, I think they're pretty smart.
Yeah, they are pretty smart, but I think in the last month or so that we've seen little signals that say that we seem to be getting to them a little bit. All of us who are out talking and pointing things out, and because Tom is a much less pessimistic person than I am. So, he's very rah, we won here, we won there, and he's right. And the best thing that I've learned from him is that he goes in and talks to county council, city council people, and sometimes that, you wake people up, and it's actually happening. I mean...
Yeah, that's pretty amazing, because I've been at city council meetings before, and most of the time the people, and they put them a little bit physically above the peasants, so they can look down on them, and you can have your 3 minutes to talk, during which time they're texting on their cell phones and just waiting for you to be done and that sort of thing. So the occasional situation where one of them actually listens would be really amazing, I would think.
Well, you have to get them one-on-one to listen. I don't think at those meetings they listen. What they do, what I've been hit with a lot here is you go and you ask a question with your 3 minutes, and they say, oh, well, we don't want to take up other people's time, so we'll let little dog's body come over and give you the answer later. And I say, no, there's more people here that want to hear that answer other than just me, but they've just
set up the rules so it's not open for discussion.
That's right. That's right.
Anyway, so the books, I think that the major subjects that you see being changed are the history, like you said, it's being rewritten, and they're just, for our benefit, of course, they're taking out all the racist parts, which is like 99% of history, and all the hurtful parts against any group, all the patriarchal parts, all the white supremacist parts. There's not very much left, so they have to come up with alternative history to fill in those massive voids after they've done that.
Yep. But they're going, I mean, kids are not allowed to learn cursive anymore, which is real.
No, exactly.
And that apparently triggers part of your brain that helps you think a lot better than if you're just doing it in block letters. So they're getting down right into the foundation of everything. And even like in the science classes, I can remember back in the 90s when I was screaming about textbooks because they're saying, okay, guys, we have this problem. You're learning critical thinking. We have this problem of global warming. Now use your critical thinking to think of how we're going to change this. We're going to fix this? And I'm screaming, wait a minute, why not use your critical thinking to say, is there global warming? Let's start like supposedly the scientists are supposed to do. But if you look at what's happening in science, they're so corrupt that why not have corrupt science books if you're going to end up at being a science? If you read the scientific journals, it's a bunch of garbage to promote their issues. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, even with the food pyramid, they're pushing all instead of healthy vegetables and fruits, they push the wheat and all the stuff that they've tainted with GMOs and whatever. So,
yeah, science has really changed, and I think most of the scientists now are like the newscasters. They have to have all the trappings of authority to make people believe they know anything, and then they just repeat what they memorized and what's acceptable in the journals. And in fact, when I was involved in a PhD program in health sciences, one of the first things I noticed on starting the work in that university was I noticed stuff in the journals that wasn't true. And that's like blasphemy to suggest that, because they tell you to write papers based on these unquestionably true journals and incredible, impeccable sources like the CDC and government agencies. And I thought, wait a minute, I know, because I've been involved in health research since the 60s, that they're saying stuff that's totally not true. And the teachers didn't know anything about it because they weren't teachers anymore. So I called up the accrediting agencies of the universities, and I asked them, the first one I found accredited the university, which means they could control how the teaching was done in order to get accreditation. But they didn't decide those rules. They were governed by another accrediting agency over them. And I talked to those guys, and they said, yeah, off the record, that's what we do. We're told by the Department of Education, which we don't really communicate with, but just get their orders, what to implement in universities and other parts of education, and we just do that. We just go down the checklist and do it. And then I called up the owners of the journals, and I said, if I had some natural protocol for cancer that made chemotherapy unnecessary and it was all verified, would you print that? And they said, absolutely not. It would really irritate our sponsors. And that was, the insight into the journals.
It gets all back to the money. The journals are all supposed to be peer-reviewed with sound science, and none of it is anymore. I mean, it truly is, as you say, they're just going to post whatever they think they can snow the public with.
Right, and it may be peer-reviewed, but the peers are controlled.
That's right.
And if you're an unacceptable peer that has strange ideas, then you're not used anymore for that.
That's exactly right. It's
interesting situation. So do you know much about the homeschool movement and what's happening with that and the different ways that's being approached?
Well, the homeschool movement, I have a lot of friends here, the homeschool. I think one of the biggest problems is coming up when the government wants to make them follow all the school books that are in the schools and not the ones that the homeschoolers do. And, and they have to go through all the testing. When I was living in Northern California, a young girl who was in college asked me to help her work on a story she had written, dystopian story. And she was telling me about, she's homeschooled, then she went to college. Mm-hmm. And she had one professor that she could bump heads with, and she did all the time. The rest of them, she answered the questions right on the test, but knew the answers, the real answers always, and she just ignored that so she could get her degree and get out of there.
Yeah.
But how many kids have the wherewithal to do what she did?
No, questioning authority is one of the first things you learn not to do.
Yep, absolutely. Peer pressure is what they're promoting. Not just in the schools, it's everywhere around. You're not supposed to make waves. Well, right. I started making waves late in life, so I'm still very positive about doing that. Converts are always the worst, and that's me.
Yeah, that's great. Hopefully you won't ever lose that.
I won't.
So what's the message about education? What do people need to become aware of? I think one of the things that maybe could be clarified that you brought up is that the school boards are not in control, and I don't think a lot of people understand that. What does that mean?
Well, the school boards are just puppets, like everything. Like your city council is becoming a puppet. Your county commission is becoming puppets. Every layer of bureaucracy is going to come under regionalism, which means that voters have no control. Pretty soon you won't even be bothered to vote. But right now you vote, you think you're voting somebody that's good in or somebody that's bad out. But everything is already just about everything is being controlled from the federal government, our federal government, just because that's their center right now for here. And it all started with the President's Council on Sustainable Development, where they put sustainable development in every department of the federal government, and that trickled down. So the federal government gives money to the schools, to the cities and counties for roads, all those things. Used to be for historic preservation. Now we want to tear that down and put up multi-family living, whatever it's, stack 'em and pack 'em housing. It's just everything is controlled, and people don't realize. It's going back to the school and the funding and how the teachers are not supposedly not making any money. But they started these lotteries that was supposed to, all this money, all the states that have lotteries. Yeah, half the money's supposed to go to the schools. Well, if all these lotteries have millions of dollars, why aren't our schools rolling in money? I mean, think about that.
What's the answer?
Well, obviously that money isn't going to the schools, and even if it did, it wouldn't help. I mean, money is not going to help our problem. I think you think homeschooling is the only answer right now to saving the kids.
That's why they're trying to take over homeschooling too.
Yep, or making it illegal. I think in California they're trying to make homeschooling illegal, and they're taking away people's kids that are homeschooled, saying you're damaging them. Yeah,
exactly. Child abuse. And you're keeping them from getting the right medical attention too. And that SB 277 that became law in California, where all the kids have to be injected with whatever chemicals CDC recommends and the state agrees. And they tried to get that passed for homeschooling too. It barely lost, and they had to take it off. But they're still intending to do that to have homeschoolers injected with all the same things. And that's prior to getting to cover all the adults as well.
And they're trying to push this through the federal government. So
they've threatened, the federal government has threatened to do it in case the states are so irresponsible as to leave any freedoms intact.
Exactly. And I said to somebody a few weeks ago, I just wish that I could be ignorant about all this for 48 hours. Just, to live like a normal person for 48 hours and not know all this.
See, this is why the anti-stress vaccine is going to be so welcome by everybody.
No, but but the problem is, what you don't know, I've started looking into the vaccine stuff. I'm just...
It is brilliant, like you said before.
It is.
Because if it makes you sick and takes away clear thinking, then all this irritating dissent that's coming up and being so stressful for the rulers will be eliminated. And I also noticed that you're talking about sustainable development, just like Tom does a lot. And I think one of the reasons this is so brilliant also is that real sustainability is a good idea. Destroying your own life support system is not brilliant. And the real idea of sustainability is that you don't commit planetary suicide. There's nothing wrong with that idea. But because it's something that seems universally right, which I still think it is, then it can be used for any terrible thing you want. Because everybody will agree with it, and the rulers will say, well, yeah, since we all know that sustainability is good, you have to give up all your rights, and that'll really keep you safe.
But that's the whole thing. It's newspeak. right?
Yeah.
It's good is bad. And so you call it sustainable, but everything that you're doing that they say is sustainable is damaging the earth. And
yeah. The real environmental policy is destroy the environment.
Exactly. So it's got to make you crazy. It's got to make you crazy.
Yeah, this is 1984 Volume 2 or something.
Yes. I have to reread Brave New World.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. There's some competition for the title because it could also be Idiocracy too.
Yeah, but that's exactly it. That's exactly it. Yeah, but you know what? There is no self-deter. If there's no, well, there might be. Forgive me, I shouldn't have said that because I know some. But for most of us, we don't want self-idiocracy. I mean, let's face it.
Yeah, I mean, I knew that was a significant movie when they started banning it everywhere. And it's actually quite realistic, and we've gone beyond it, just like with 1984.
Yep.
And you're supposed to be, I think one of the signs of the success of all the brainwashing and programming is that people are willing to fight and die for things that are completely ridiculous. And should be obviously not true.
Isn't that scary, though? I mean, you think about what people are fighting over. But that brings me to an issue. You know, you see all this fighting going on campuses and things.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah, that's to stop fascism. That's why they beat up people and, are hitting women with bike locks and stuff like that. It's just to stop racism and fight fascism.
Exactly. But the amazing thing, the thing that amazes me is all these protesters have to be paid.
Well, of course.
This isn't, it's like it's like in Tsarist Russia when they thought they could start a revolution with the poor people, and it turned out, no, it isn't going to work that way. They just aren't going to rise up. I think the only maybe true rising up were the yellow vests in France, but most people they aren't going to rise up.
Right.
If anybody's going to rise up, it's going to be the middle class, and that's why they're demolishing the middle class with redistribution of wealth.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, and that's another thing, just like sustainable is a good idea. There's nothing wrong with fairness. So fairness is used to justify things like theft.
Exactly. Right. Taxes are theft, and fairness saying, but the thing is, no matter how equal they make all of us be at, say, one certain second of time, we're never all going to be equal because we all think differently, and there's going to be people that are going to be striving, and that's what I think is one of the best things, that people really like freedom. People really want freedom. So hopefully people are going to start waking up and realizing they need to get involved and say, no, we want our freedom. We do not want this one world government.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons that education needs to be recaptured, because things like sustainability, which have their truth, are being misused and misunderstood. But it's the same thing with equality. Because America was a unique idea of a country, because everybody would have the equal opportunity to do what they wanted to do as long as they don't go around hurting other people, and live exactly the way you want, achieve what you want, etc. And now equality, which is a good idea, is being slightly twisted to say that everybody should be equal. That means have everything the same, look the same, do the same activities. Loss of individuality is called equality. And people aren't thinking clear enough to see what's wrong with that picture.
And that's with every word that they use, though.
Democracy is the same deal. I mean, democracy is not in the Declaration of Independence or the Constitution or anything like that. And the founders of America considered it to be a terrible suicidal system. And so all the people go on the news now and are saying, well, we have to protect our democracy. We don't want a democracy. That's a terrible system.
But they've convinced the people and they've been using this for what? 10, 15 years, always saying democracy, never talking about a republic or anything. And for the very reason, because they want mob rule. They want that democracy.
Yeah, exactly. And especially if you can control most of the media and educate the people about what you want them to do and how to think, then the majority is going to be the mob. And if you care about minorities, real minorities, which means anybody that has an unpopular idea that needs to be looked at, minorities have no rights in a democracy at all.
Yep. And the minority, the best minority is the individual. And when you say that, so the individual has no rights at all in a democracy. That should scare the you-know-what out of them.
Yeah, I don't remember them mentioning that on the news, though, anytime recently.
No, I don't think so. And
Must ran out of time. So, what are the groups that are doing positive things about education, and what are the ideas coming up about trying to heal this situation?
There are parent groups all over the country that are doing it, and I think they're doing it the right way because they're doing it in their own local towns.
Right.
But I don't know of one major group, and that's probably just because I'm ignorant of it, because I'm fighting in this little corner, of American Policy Center. But but it just, I think it. As Tom says, we've got to take back our own towns, and that looks like the if we start taking back our own towns, that's going to make people nervous.
Yeah, and you mentioned counties, too, county boards of supervisors being a little bit like city councils. And I've often wondered, if you're in a city that's becoming a UN Agenda 21 demonstration city, which a lot of them are, is it any better if you move out into the county outside the city limits? Do you know about that?
Well, yes, I live in the county outside the city limits, and it's only better right now because they haven't put their foot down, but there is no different. All the counties and all the cities, all the areas in the whole country have been put under regionalism. We are all, they're putting a blue line around the cities, around the area, and you build in there. And I don't know about your area, but right now, anywhere I go driving, I see all these multi-family buildings going up all over because they want to bring all the people into the city so they can control them. Right. I'm not in the city, but I'm very close. But I have chickens and bees, and I'm going to keep them. But
so you're enslaving those poor chickens and bees against their will. It sounds like. Right.
I'm robbing the honey. Shame, shame.
So for the moment, the counties are not under as much direct attack as the cities. But why don't you explain to people that may not know, what's this regionalism word? What does that mean?
Okay. If Rosa Corey has some maps on one of her websites that show the 10 regions of the United States the North America, whatever, on how they're breaking it up, and each region will have a supervisor that runs it. But they're deciding which roads are still going to last. They want to get people out of cars and walking and riding bikes. Well, how far can you take your bike? You can, you're not going to take your family on a vacation to the next county even.
That would look interesting.
But regionalism is to control us, to put us all in a region, and it's a very complicated thing because you have food sheds where you're only going to be getting your food within 100 miles of where you live. But think about it, if you're in a multi-city area, then you're going to be competing for that same food that they are going to be competing for. So it's going to limit what people are eating. And regionalism is a book. I mean, seriously, it's covering everything. I mean, what they're doing is doing the tiny details with the local areas through regionalism.
Okay, and I think it's also, if I understand it, a system of taking away the jurisdiction of local governments. So, for example, if they have 10 cities within a certain designated region, and those cities used to, theoretically anyway, be deciding what's going to happen in their city, once they all take money from the newly invented region, then they sign a contract to do whatever the regional government tells them, which is not elected.
Exactly. And the people that will be running these are called stakeholders.
Yeah, exactly.
You're not electing them, and they're going to be named. They're going to have that job for life if they want it. You can't get rid of them. It's definitely, but they're already doing that. But they're still letting you keep your name as a supervisor or something. But
But you sign a contract to do whatever you're told, right?
Yep. And our mayor here, our county mayor, kept telling us when we were fighting the regional plan that, oh, don't worry about it. You don't have to stop it. I'm going to stop it. I'm on the train. I'll derail it before it gets to the station. So it didn't happen. So we went for a meeting with him, and we were saying, why didn't you stop this? You are the biggest city in the area. If you weren't on it, it wouldn't happen. And I pushed him on it, and I said, but you keep saying this. And he said to me, Kathleen, he said, sustainable development is the only game in town. And if you're not at the table, you're not in the game. And that's why he did this. Now, he is a brand new Republican representative for our area in the federal government now, but this is how they do it. He said, we took the money. We now are at the table. We're playing the game. They took the money.
Yeah, but you don't really just get to decide how you play the game, right? You're sitting there, but you're told every move to make.
Yes, so they want to be useful idiots. They don't understand useful idiots are no better than us. They just get to live a little longer. Maybe.
Yeah, maybe. That's the theory. And the regions that you were talking about, the 10 regions, I think that they were splitting up the country into, are those the same thing as what are called FEMA regions?
Yep, exactly.
Okay. So it's basically a separate government structure that's being superimposed over the original ones of cities and counties and states.
Yes, and they're just taking the time to ease us out of expecting to elect all of our representatives. It's sort of like the UN. You have no representation there. They don't owe us anything. We can't vote on anything. So,
yeah, well, I would think that they'd want to keep the vote in place because since it doesn't mean anything, it gives people a pacifying feeling that they are really in control.
That may be, and I used to think that, but what I'm seeing now with all the voting and how corrupt it is, and how they're bringing in all these illegal aliens to vote, and now they want the 16-year-olds to vote.
Right.
And unless they still need to redistribute wealth by spending money on elections, and maybe they do because that's, like you say, it's a distraction that maybe they think we still need, but it just seems like it's getting overwhelmingly a mess.
I know in the last congressional election in 2018, when there were results that apparently weren't acceptable, they would just bring in truckloads of extra ballots.
That's right.
To fix the result. And even if it was after the deadline, It was just like, it didn't matter.
That's what I'm saying. None of it matters anymore. It's like, why are we playing this game if there are no rules?
And why does nobody in office object? In fact, in Florida, I think, what was it, Broward County that was voted one way and then was completely overturned. And I think was it the mayor or one of the state representatives that showed up when they were counting ballots and it was already over, and they just keep adding extra ballots, and they told him they had police there to throw him out because he wasn't allowed to observe.
Exactly.
Right.
I mean, what is this? How can anybody wrap their whole minds around this? How can you comprehend all this? And because obviously the media, when they do finally do the story, they've done it so that it, I don't know, pacifies the people. I don't know. It just, they don't dig into anything. And if the story comes out and they have to run it, then they figure out how they can say it to make it be innocuous. I mean, they don't even defend the corruption. They just ignore it.
Yeah, pretty interesting. Now, before I forget, how does this all tie in to the bringing up of what's called the Green New Deal, which is actually creating some dissent within the leadership of the Democratic Party because some think it's too obvious, apparently, of what they're trying to do and want to do it more incrementally. Others say, forget that, it's time to just openly say, we're taking over. That's connected to these local things that are happening, right?
Oh, well, yes, but this is, the Green New Deal is Agenda 21 combined with the Communist 10 rules, whatever. But, there's different takes. Because one, the Green New Deal has made all the people right now running for president on the Democratic ticket go really far to the left. I mean, they were already fairly far to the left, but it makes them go really far to the left.
Yeah.
What there's also talk about is that AOC and her cadre are already trying to take over from Pelosi, take over running the whole Congress, which is going to be this is going to be very interesting in the next few weeks to see what is happening, because Pelosi's going to be fighting for her job, and if the Green New Dealers take it over.
Well, I think Pelosi's only made a few $100 million for being in Congress, I guess by being really frugal and watching her purchases and stuff. But the question is to compare that with the power and money behind AOC, and which one is really more powerful? And I don't know the answer.
Oh, the people behind AOC, and they're fascinating. Have you watched that video that shows that supposedly explains her?
I saw it this morning, and while I was getting ready for this show, and I didn't have time to watch it yet. Oh, it looks really interesting. Did you see it?
I watched it yesterday, and it blew my mind. Yes.
So Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is what her background is. She was a bartender, right?
Right.
And then she had a lot of money and was winning the Senate race. So what did you learn that explains how that happened?
The people behind her she was hired to be an actress. And apparently this has happened, I can't remember the number. Might have been 28 different people across the country that have been elected. And forgive me, that could be totally wrong. But she was hired, and she is taught everything she's supposed to say. And as they pointed out, when she speaks just offhand, she sounds like a ditzy idiot. But when she's following their script, she's saying these things, and people are actually agreeing with her. So it's the video. If it's true, and it really sounds like it is, it's a whole new thing that they're taking over our government from without, rather than doing it through the sustainable the Agenda 21. They're just coming in, and they're going to elect all these people around the country that will then just take it over. It's mind-blowing.
Yeah. So, and as far as what you said, how she speaks extemporaneously, she was just at South by Southwest in Austin, Texas, and somebody made a compilation during a 1 hour discussion with an interviewer, and it was like 100 times she was saying, well, like, I mean, like, and whatever. And she said that like 50 times or 100 times. And it was really amazing. And the audience was cheering like wildly, like the Beatles had just gotten there or something.
Oh, man. But their audience is programmed. She's already a star. She's attractive. But she has a degree in international economics. Duh. I don't think. I mean, if she does, then that degree means nothing.
That would speak to the educational issue that you were talking about.
Yes.
So you watched the movie. So who's funding her and who is behind the whole plan to get her into office and all this stuff?
I watched it very quickly. There's one major guy whose name I can't pronounce.
Okay.
And apparently, and you have to watch it.
That's not her chief of staff, is it?
Yes.
Chakravarti is his name.
Yes. And he is at least he's the first puppeteer, above her. And he's controlling, but he was one of the brains behind this whole thing.
Yeah. And it's really interesting to watch the people in congressional hearings and House and Senate hearings, and you look at these people when total nonsense is being explained to them, and it's like a comedy movie. They're looking real serious, and they're nodding, and they're really supporting all these ideas that are obviously crazy. And again, it just reminds you that this is the shooting of Idiocracy too. It has to be.
It is. But you think about this. They don't go to Congress to help save this country. They go to this Congress now to be millionaires. I mean, where else can you become a millionaire in such a short time for doing, well, I'd like to say doing nothing, but I wish they were doing nothing.
Me too. That would be great.
So,
and you're talking about the party that's supporting the Green New Deal going farther left, but I think one of the subtle brainwashings that we've all fallen for is that we have to have labels and sides and parties. And, the founders of the country really warned against the idea of having any parties at all. Because when you really think about it, what is the benefit of having a party? It seems to me that what it means is you don't have to think about individual issues anymore because you just look up what your party believes and you say that's what you think.
And don't you think that was programmed into the whole thing? I mean, it works for the Hegelian dialect. You have two sides against each other, but nobody notices that the two sides, the two parties that we have, are working in pretty much lockstep with each other. They pretend they disagree, and they have these little hearings and yell at each other, but they're all agreeing on everything.
Didn't Obama and George Bush call each other brothers?
Yes.
They have separate mothers, but they're really brothers underneath all that.
Exactly.
Golfing friends and all that. Yeah, and what if there were no parties? I think people are just subconsciously thinking that, well, if we didn't have a party, how would we know what to think? How would we know it was right? And they may be right based on people having, non-functional brains at this point. But originally, the only point in having a party was that some organization could tell you what to vote for. And
just to raise more money. But I think, I think the founding fathers were absolutely right. Have men, women of integrity run for the different offices. And, it worked very well at the founding of our country. And I haven't looked at that part of history yet, why and how those parties got started, but it makes obvious sense because people who want to control are always going to start things like that and, start a union, start a party, start whatever they can. And which is, anathema to to the great American spirit, because we're supposed, and this is one of the biggest problems, because we have people that want to control, and we have people that want to live and let live. And when you want to live and let live, you just want to run your own life. You want to just do whatever you want, and you don't want to have to go and have to fight people all the time over what they want to tell you what to do. But we know which is the party, that the group that loses out is the people that want to live and let live.
Right, exactly. And when you're talking about education, what comes to my mind too is how the kids are being used as a weapon right now. And I started looking at these organizations that are connected to the Green New Deal. First of all, I was talking to Organic Consumers Association, because I've been a supporter of theirs for organic food and farming for a long time. We had their founder and their chief legal counsel on our show, and they've just totally thrown in their support to the Green New Deal, and they won't communicate about what's wrong with it, because I guess once a program like that starts, all the effort goes into getting it passed, not critically looking at it at all. And I noticed that there are these other groups called Sunrise Movement, supported by OCA and others, that are specializing in getting kids to be the spokesman of the Green New Deal, because they don't understand it, and they're perfect for it. You can just terrify them and say, what is it, the world's going to end in, it used to be 12 years, now it's 11 years. Time's going really fast. And if the adults don't understand, they're going to be destroying the world. Sunrise Movement and some other justice movements and stuff like that. It's
right.
Really interesting.
Yeah. Somebody was telling me about the Sunrise Movement, but I don't remember what it was. It was just a major negative. It's a major organization that's been set up to promote all this.
There's a strike they're planning. I don't know when it is, but it's for kids to strike about climate change or something like that. And the kids are genuine, that's one reason they want them as spokesmen, because, and I know it's sexist to say spokesman, that's why I'm doing it, but they are genuinely terrified that the world's going to end by the time they're, 20 or something like that. So they're perfect to speak for the cause.
Well, they're perfect, but I remember growing up always being told about elders know more. Elders experience life and they've seen things. And I think that's why they're using kids, because kids don't know anything, and you can program something into them pretty easily, and immediately they are going to be the perfect spokespeople, because who doesn't love children?
Yeah, exactly. And they're obviously sincere. And the best way to program them is through fear. And I think you saw the same thing when they select the kids to be the spokespeople after the Florida school shooting. Where was that? Parkland?
Yep.
Right. And out of all the kids, they took like 4 who happened to all be in the drama club, and they were really good at making presentations, and they were convinced that if you outlaw weapons, the world will be safe. Right in line with this world peace idea.
And what is fascinating with this outlawing weapons is it doesn't matter how often, how many times you can show them which countries, Pol Pot, Hitler, Russia, when they in Venezuela outlaw weapons, and then what happens? But it doesn't matter, because it's a whole new world, and therefore it's going to be totally different than it was before.
That's like the common core attitude of social issues, I guess.
Yes.
This logic is unfair and racist, obviously. So you have to go by what it feels like. And what it feels like is that if there were no weapons, there would be no fighting and no conflict. In fact, in the UK right now, they're looking at outlawing knives. And there are a lot of big stores that are going to stop selling kitchen knives because they create murder.
Well, and they're going to have to go after baseball bats, but why haven't they banned cars?
And maybe have certain operations done on people to make their hands and feet, safer.
Perfect.
Padding or something, medical padding, that would be a big business, I think.
Yeah. Oh, never mind.
I don't think anybody's thought of that. If any of you guys want to, think about a new big business to get started, medical padding could be perfect for world peace. Because if you make sure that there's a couple of inches of foam rubber around hands and feet and maybe the top of your heads and stuff, people could get in fights, but nobody would get hurt. It would be great.
Perfect idea, Richard. Perfect idea.
Yeah.
But what the real focus is using reason and logic or feelings, emotions to decide major issues is what is happening.
Right. And again, just like sustainability being valid if it's seen correctly, and fairness being a good thing if it's seen correctly, these other issues are the same way. In fact, your feeling, if you open it up and you expand your own real self-awareness and consciousness, your feeling tells you a lot. For example, that Agenda 21 is not a good idea. So feeling is great, and it is a tremendous feedback mechanism and a step toward the internal guidance that I think everybody has. But if it's slightly twisted and programmed, then your feeling is going to tell you that everybody should be equal in every circumstance and aspect of their body and mind and everything else. And anything that's unequal feels hurtful, so it should be banned. It's quite subtle, actually, because all these things they're using against us are kind of new versions of things that really are good.
Absolutely, I agree, and you've gotten me thinking deeply about that, because I've never understood how people. Let's just talk a minute about animal rights people who feel that we need to remove humans from the face of the earth so that animals can live in peace forever after that.
Exactly.
How do you get people to? I can only see it as they hate their own species, or their self-esteem is destroyed. But how can you get people to want to wipe their own species off the face of the earth?
Get them to believe in justice helps a lot, because justice is a very low-level understanding of things. I mean, again, it's a twisting of something that's good, because, if somebody does something terrible to their town or the environment in general, it is just in a good way that they should clean it up. But justice can also be used with a slight twist to enjoy the punishing of bad people, which totally shuts down deeper levels of consciousness, and you have to get rid of empathy. So if you want justice, which translates to bad people suffering, on a deep psychological level, you always wish the same thing for yourself that you wish for others, because you know that you're not perfect either. And once you have that, once you can enjoy the suffering of people you think are bad, that sets in motion the chain of self-condemnation, and then you can have them do anything. Whereas if you substitute justice, which takes tremendous courage after we've been programmed that it's the best thing in the universe, throw away justice and put in unconditional love, then you don't condemn yourself anymore, and you can't fall for this kind of stuff. You still stop bad actions, but that doesn't require condemnation or hating anybody. It's a much higher principle, and we're never supposed to start thinking about stuff like that. It's always fear and justice. In other words, punishment. That always includes self-punishment, and then you can fall right into the steps that humans have to be eliminated. These guys are smart, like you said.
They're a lot smarter than I am. No, that was excellent how you put that. And I you can feel these things, but not. And for me, I have to learn something so that I can vocalize it, so that I can say it and get it. I mean, not just to say it out loud for other people to hear, but just for me to understand it. And you said that very well.
And you're illustrating the same thing we were just talking about feeling. You know, that once you don't just memorize something, but feel it on a deeper level, that's the real aspect of the guidance that comes through feeling, if it's opened up and healthy again. And it's the one they're twisting to make us feel fear and everything. And we just have to get back the genuine versions of all these things that they've been twisting, it seems to me, and be brave enough to drop the labels and start actually looking at stuff and saying, wait a minute, the emperor doesn't have any clothes on, no matter what anybody's saying.
And that's another thing that you keep thinking about. So many things that are happening today. You say, wait, the emperor doesn't have any clothes. That is, and that one. But this takes you back to Daniel Webster's dictionary. He wrote a dictionary so that the words couldn't be twisted as we're twisting them today. Right. So you can't hold on to anything if you don't keep it working. So
now we've added phrases like, like whatever.
Yes. I was listening to somebody the other day, and I didn't want to keep listening because he kept using and that just drives me up the wall.
Yeah. It's very challenging to stay awake enough to avoid the programming.
Yep.
So, well, looking, all this stuff is really worth considering because it could help us to see solutions. And after all the discussion of all this wide scope of things that could make many shows, what do you think are the insights that you're seeing that could lead to positive solutions, cutting through the programs? If somebody asked you after all these years of working on this stuff, okay, besides knowing how bad it is, which is the same thing I'm looking at, what does all that real awareness and education lead you toward as far as how people could shake this stuff off and get back to who they actually are?
I would say talking to just when you talk to people, when you get them to understand what's going on and it's opening their eyes, you hope that enough people will open their eyes, and it doesn't have to be a lot of people, I don't believe, to make a difference, but they have to. And this is where I'm stuck, because how the media is controlled, even social media, where they're banning so many different things that don't agree with the Green New Deal or whatever. Mm-hmm. How do you get the word out? How do you get people to learn these things? That's the question I have for you, because you've got that answer and I need to have it.
Well, it's definitely challenging when everything starts getting banned. That's true. And I know on our show, we have inspiring people like you to help people wake up and start looking at things from a different perspective. But even then, I tend to have to watch the words that I use, because I know that there are electronic, computerized bots that scan our word usage all the time. So there are 5 or 6 areas where if you really talk much about them, you do disappear off the major platforms. So we've been using a combination of that with careful word use and a private counterpart of the platform where we can speak freely. And so where I'm stuck, similar to you, is, all right, we've got this private platform. It's on a customized webinar base where people come in and it's not publicly accessible, so we can speak freely. How do we get a lot of people to be aware of that and find us on the private platforms? And I'm still looking for the best answers for that. I'm really open to suggestions.
I wish I had the suggestions. This is one area I am totally silent on because I don't know.
One of the things that I wondered about is on the public platforms, the main YouTube and Facebook and all these things, would they be able to catch you if you spoke opposite to what you meant in an understood sarcastic format? So if, for example, you said, see, I don't use the V word very much because that's a real hot topic of getting censored quickly. I talk about injecting people with poisons to make them immune from disease. And what if I said, everybody should be forced to get every possible injection that the CDC recommends, and especially for newborn babies, but also for everybody else, because it's an little known fact that people are having so much sickness because they're deficient in formaldehyde and they don't have enough of the elements that you can only get from cut up aborted babies and things injected into your system. And the lack of this is why we're all sick. So you have to force everybody to go out and do that right away and explain that same fact about all the ingredients that are being injected into people and say, if you know anybody who's not allowing their kids to be injected with stuff, they're actually killing their neighborhood. So you should report them immediately and have shows like that. I wonder if they would be banned.
People would think you were either from the Onion or the what is that bee? The something bee? Yeah.
Yeah, one of the mainstream educational outlets, I guess.
Babylon Bee.
Oh, Babylon Bee, okay, yeah. There's a lot of great, popular news outlets like that. And maybe the authorities would recognize it, but they wouldn't care because they think, remember, this is idiocracy too. Nobody's going to know that you're being sarcastic. So that may not be the answer. I don't know.
I don't know. I want the answer. I want you to tell me the answer because you're far further ahead on this than I will ever be.
Well, no, don't assume that. That may not be true. But because we've been trained to put ourselves down. That's part of our programming. And that's supposed to be really good and humble and everything. But it kind of, if it's done, it's like the other twisted stuff. If it's done the wrong way, that assumption could become true and we might miss stuff that we'd otherwise see. But I think that one thing that's good to remember is, this education about all the bad things happening is good and important and valuable, but it's not the end goal. Just having always more bad stuff to report on is not sufficient in itself. Our main task in all these areas is really to be creative enough to find solutions that work, and hopefully we'll stay focused on that.
And that's what Tom and a group of people have been working on lately, and I think he's probably going to ask you to come in on this too, because we want to have that answer. We want, or answers.
Yeah, with no preconceptions and no labels and no fighting about who's right, because that's irrelevant. I mean, if there's a 4-year-old kid that walks in and gives us all the answers, great. I don't care who it comes from. It can come from Nancy Pelosi or Chuck Schumer or anybody who wants to redeem themselves and start telling the truth. I don't think the source matters.
Nope.
It's just whether something is true or not. So, and are we brave enough to drop our labels and not care whether we get credit for anything? That doesn't matter. That's a big, I on Facebook, people keep using those labels, and what they don't understand is those labels mean nothing. And
and those labels damage.
They're like the choke collars we're wearing.
Yes.
And we just keep them on. They'd slip right over our heads and drop off if we let them.
Exactly. But they don't, I think it's because, yes, some of these people are learning a lot, but they don't stop and work out that information they're learning to put it together with other things they're learning. They just learn it, and they know these facts, but they don't assimilate them so that they understand that. I mean, how many times do you have to tell people that there's no difference between Republicans and Democrats? How many times do you have? And they say, yes, they know, but then they go and they spew against one or the other. It's like...
It's kind of a laziness, right? It's a tendency to do what's familiar, and you've just made your identity against fighting Democrats or fighting Republicans or hating the president or whatever. If you drop that, you actually have to look at everything new and say what's true.
You're right. It probably is laziness. It's just...
people have to be reminded that pleasure and enjoyment are great, but the fake sources of that are being offered are counterfeit. And really what we're after, everybody is after feeling really good, but they're trying to get it through one drug or another. And the people that are putting down the other party or, the other philosophy or whatever as their identity, they're trying to feel good out of that, like they're superior, and that makes them happy. But actually there's this other source of feeling good where you get rid of all your conditioning and just get in touch with what's true. And it feels so good that the attraction of the drugs of all kinds is gone. And if, that's not a partisan issue. So if we could find a way to expose people to the possibility that, look, there's something that feels better than even what you're after to feel good, and you should try it. It has no bad effects. All the side effects are good. It makes you strong and clear, and you get the enjoyment of contributing to the world and yourself at the same time. Somehow we got to let people know there's a better drug. It's like the drug endorphins, right? You can make them at home in your own body. It doesn't take a lab, and they have no side effects, and they make you healthy. And the way you produce them is by exercising. And they're a great drug and really good for you. There's an internal drug that if people got a tiny taste of, they'd drop the other stuff right away.
You're right, and it's. I think you have the answer, but how do you get people to take just the step? First, there's the step to listen. Then there is the step to try it. That's the bigger one.
I think we're going to have to do it, and by our example, and I don't mean just visual example. I mean, this isn't, I'm getting into 3 more shows here, but I think there's a really deep, subtle aspect where, how the 5G system and all the microwave harmful technologies are being rolled out to do overkill of making sure that nobody can think anymore and that any remaining health is destroyed, because that's how these frequencies are selected. But what they forgot to mention is that humans are generators individually of a very subtle frequency that reflects our own consciousness and thought patterns and emotional state. And it affects other people by resonance on a deep physical level. And if we create that or unleash that in ourselves, even without saying a word, we're going to have an effect on everybody else. And I think I'm going to suggest we get into that with Tom, because the idea is unity not based on memorization and regimentation, but on ripping off all the labels to who we actually are. And I think that would be the end of the domination from the global rulers at that point.
I love it. I love it.
Fun.
Yeah.
Anyway, there's enough to talk about so that if you ever have time to come back and do another installment, it would be fun.
I'd love to.
That would be neat.
See if I can get my camera working.
Yeah, because people would really like to see you.
Going to the Apple store is not a fun thing.
No, I can imagine. Apple's not the most exemplary company at the moment either.
No, but it's the easiest, it's the most user-friendly computer.
Yeah, if you got rid of all the evil companies in your life, you wouldn't have any technology at all at this point.
I wouldn't mind that. I don't have television, so
me either.
And I heat my house with wood, so
wow, how nice.
Just a little bit.
Okay, well, keep us in mind to come back soon, and hold on, and we'll say goodbye in the break here.
Thank you.
Okay, everybody, there goes Kathleen Marquardt. I thought that was incredible, and I really appreciate somebody of her sincerity and quality of really wanting to do something good for the world. It's interesting that we've had Tom on the show so many times, and Kathleen is one of the people who's working most closely with Tom DeWeese as Vice President of the American Policy Center. That's a good site to keep in touch with as far as developments in Agenda 21 and property rights and things like that. I think that's americanpolicy.org, if I remember right, just offhand. I'm pretty sure that's right. And, you know, when Kathleen found out that I was a vegetarian and involved in all this health stuff and don't eat animals and all that, she thought, oh no, I sent in my book, Animal Scam USA or whatever it's called. And I told her, no, it's a good book. Because, you know, I think one of the main themes of the discussion we just had is that many of the ideas that are used to mislead us are based on things that are true. And, excuse me, so protecting animals, I think, is really legitimate. But like so many other things that are true and legitimate, it's used as a way to mislead people. And that's what her book was about. So I enjoyed it. And as I mentioned to her too, I've been a strong environmentalist since the 1960s, and I still am. But I don't support any of the environmental scam, and the Green New Deal thing, I think, is a suicidal suggestion for the world, and not because everything, excuse me, that my voice is wearing out. Not because everything environmental is wrong. That's completely not true at all. And a lot of people on the so-called conservative side have a hard time looking at the valid environmental concerns. Although now they may all go crazy for the Green New Deal, I don't know. But the environmental issues are real. Taking care of your life support system on the planet you live on is really a good idea. But using it as an excuse to give up your liberties and support global tyranny is not as good. And that should never happen. So when I've tried to talk to organizations like OCA about what's wrong with the Green New Deal, generally those organizations won't respond at all, and they don't. And I'm trying to talk to Sunrise Movement now as well, and I don't know if they're going to respond either. I'm not against them. I just want them to make it real and coherent and sustainable in the real sense, not just shutting down the petroleum industry before you unleash the real technologies, which are not solar and wind. Those have serious drawbacks, not just dirty battery technology, but a lot of other things. And they're not that efficient, but they're magnetic-based energy technologies and other things like that work great, right in line with running cars on water, which has totally been perfected and demonstrated before agents killed the guy who was doing it. Those need to be incorporated in the Green New Deal, and also getting rid of geoengineering, which is the reality of destructive climate change. Man-made climate change is real, okay? That is not fake. The way it's used is fake, and what it's blamed on is fake. But the real cause of the part of it we can see right now is geoengineering, and the president, if he was doing his job to protect the country against air raids, foreign or domestic origin wouldn't matter, needs to send up escorts, military jets, to take those planes down to land at her most convenient airfield and end geoengineering overnight. And I think a lot of the destructive climate change would end starting right then. And that absolutely should be talked about in depth and high priority in the Green New Deal if they really care anything about climate change, which the, under the surface funding sources for programs like the Green New Deal, of course, they're interested in destroying the environment, not saving it. So we need to do some changing about that. And this thing of using children to go out and promote the Green New Deal is unconscionable as far as I'm concerned. The kids are sincere and they are easily influenced by fear, telling them that the world is going to end in 11 years, which there's a lot of reasons that it might, actually, a lot sooner than 11 years, but not the ones that they're being told. And, there just needs to have sincere motivation come back in to replace the suicidal tendency of the ruling elite, and I think that's our job. And as we talk about on a lot of these shows, waiting for the rulers to do that is probably not a great investment of our time, and trying to pressure them into doing that, I don't think that's realistic either. Trying to do it by force is not going to work. I'm a strong Second Amendment supporter, but that's not going to be the solution to turning things around in the world, I don't think. It's necessary for other reasons, but this boils down to areas that we're not supposed to ever find out about for real, which have to do with consciousness. And you can't even talk too much about that on open public platforms, but we're working already on a project based on that is tied into quantum physics and forbidden health information and ways to influence those that are intending to destroy the world without confrontation, but much more powerful. If you're interested in that at all, you're welcome to check it out if you're brave enough. It's at planetaryhealingclub.com. And for the public videos, keep watching the major platforms. And when we get kicked off there, eventually probably will happen, then find us on brighteon.com, brighteon.com, or lostartsradio.com, or both. And Brighteon needs your support, by the way. It's a new platform. And the more views they get on videos on brighteon.com, the better they can survive. And it's really important because it's a non-censoring platform started by our friend Mike, whose full name has been censored on the internet, but you know who I mean. And anyway, thanks for joining us for this fun conversation with Kathleen Marquardt. I think that was really great. I enjoyed it. Learned a lot from her. And look for our other shows. Check out our website. And if you want to do some work, meet us at planetaryhealingclub.com, and I'll see you next time.
Introducing Lost Arts Radio Live, our new Saturday late afternoon, early evening 1-hour live stream show. This new show precedes our Planetary Healing Club, which starts at 9 p.m. Eastern and 6 p.m. Pacific. The Planetary Healing Club, which is not free and open to the public, but you can join for a minimum donation of just $10 a month. Our new live stream show, which is free, starts Saturdays at 7:30 p.m. Eastern and 4:30 Pacific. It can be accessed by going to lostartsradio.com/live. You can tune into our live stream from our Facebook page at facebook.com/lostartsradio, from our YouTube channel at youtube.com/lostartsradio, as well as both Periscope and Twitter at Lost Arts Radio. You can ask questions during the show by using the chat function on YouTube or make a comment on Facebook during the live stream. Once again, that's Lost Arts Radio Live, Saturdays at 7:30 Eastern, 4:30 Pacific. As of January 2018, the Saturday live call-in show is now an interactive video platform called the Planetary Healing Club. The cost is just a $10 minimum monthly donation, automatically billed through your PayPal account. Sign up at lostartsradio.com/club. The Planetary Healing Club is every Saturday night at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. You get your link to participate in the show upon signing up as a member. Those shows are also archived as well for club members. Listen to our new shows with guests every Sunday night at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. All Sunday shows with guests have archives freely available on our website at lostartsradio.com. You can also find them at blogtalkradio.com/lostartsradio, as well as our YouTube channel, youtube.com/C/lostartsradio. Mixcloud at mixcloud.com/lostartsradio. And finally, look us up under the podcast directory on iTunes. Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/lostartsradio or on Twitter at Lost Arts Radio. Be sure to join the free Lost Arts Radio Facebook group as well. Just search for Lost Arts Radio Group within Facebook. You can also join our forum on our website if you want to interact with other listeners. We also have links to all of the great independent musicians whose music we feature each week on Lost Arts Radio. When you do your Amazon shopping, please use Amazon's Smile program at smile.amazon.com. And when you choose Lost Arts Research Institute in Sedona, Arizona as your charity, Amazon will donate 0.5% of whatever your order total is to Lost Arts Research Institute to help fund the building of the school and keep our radio show on the air. Please visit lostartsresearchinstitute.org for more information on the school we want to build. Be sure to sign up for our free weekly newsletter on our site under the Radio Show tab or right from the button on our Facebook page. Contact Richard at richard@lostartsradio.com or myself, Doug Diamond, at doug@lostartsradio.com. Thanks again for listening to Lost Arts Radio, and we'll see you again next week.
See the kindness in your eyes that's born from deep within, from your soul that's good and wise. You'd see a loving look from eyes of blue that talk, a love that lights my way and leads me where I walk. You are so beautiful to me, so very beautiful to me. Those kind eyes that I see, so very beautiful to me. Did you know you are my hero? You're always there for me. I see the world you see, and it's so beautiful to me.
Look from my eyes, you'd see the world that I can see. The magic of a rainbow is there for you and me. A cloudless silver lining is waiting at the end, with all the dreams you dream on the road that lies ahead. So beautiful to me, so very beautiful to me. Those kind eyes that I see, so very beautiful to me. Did you know you are my hero? You're always there for me. I see the world you see, and